All right, perfect. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. Hello, everyone. This debate will be focused on the following situation. Individuals with autism or other developmental disabilities who engage in severe aggressive behavior in SIB can pose significant threats to themselves, peers, staff, teachers, parents who work with them. The ethical code promotes the use of least restrictive procedures. However, those providing services to individuals with severe problem behavior may consider the use of restraints and/or seclusion, stating these are necessary to prevent severe self-harm or harm to others. Consider the ethical code in the literature and create a debate that addresses the different sides. Is the use of restraints and seclusion ethical? What role should a behavior analyst play in interventions involving restraint and seclusion? What does the literature and ethical code indicate? For this debate, we will be referring to the Civil Rights Data Collection, or CRDC's definitions of physical restraint, mechanical restraint, and seclusion. Physical restraint is a personal restriction that immobilizes or reduces the ability of moving torso, arms, legs, or head freely. It does not include a physical escort. A mechanical restraint is defined as the use of any device or equipment to restrict a person's freedom of movement, and seclusion is the involuntary confinement of a student alone in a room or area from which the person is physically prevented from leaving. We will begin with opening statements from each side, followed by an evidence-based portion, rebuttal, and closing remarks. Each team will have 4 minutes to complete each section. Arguing for the pro team will be Lisette Moreno and Claire Calvert. The con team will be argued by Katie Dirks and Amanda Moore. My name is Danielle Rowland, and I will be moderating the debate. We will begin with the opening statements. The pro team will start us off, and they have 4 minutes.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisette Moreno. I'm currently a registered behavioral technician. I provide both in-home and in-clinic ABA therapy. I have been in the field for approximately 3.5 years, and I live in the state of Illinois, and it's my 4th semester at Ball State University. As Danielle mentioned, I will serve as a starter and attacker for the pro team. So to begin with, one of the core ethical principles of ABA is benefiting others. This principle ensures that the main focus be for the benefit of the client primarily, but the same principle targets the importance of benefiting others, such as teachers, peers, family, community, etc. This core principle measures short-term negatives versus long-term benefits. So several people can be treated without the use of restraints and seclusions. However, they may be necessary in some cases. Seclusions are sometimes necessary to help protect the individual as well as others around him and her under severe cases. It is important to note that seclusions should only be used by professional judgment and best practice. Restraints are typically used to reduce the frequency of severe problem behaviors. And by severe problem behaviors, I am referring to those instances of severe cases where children have bitten off their fingers, where their life is in danger or that of others. Restraints should only be implemented by trained professionals. Both restraints and seclusions practices vary by state, district, and classroom. There are also several different types of restraints varying in level of aversiveness. So for example, Danielle will pull up my first visual, which is a prone restraint, and it means that the child is laid in a face down position. And the second visual is that of a mechanical restraint, which Danielle also briefly touched upon, and it includes the straps, cuffs, tapes, and other devices to prevent movement and or sense perception. This has also been used to pin down the actual individual down. So both the prone and the mechanical are kind of on one side of aversiveness. So prone would be the less aversive, and the mechanical would be way more aversive. There's also the supine restraints, which just means that the child is laid face up. There's also physical restraints, which is the use of another individual's actual body to hold down the said target individual. And finally, there are chemical restraints, which rely purely on medication to dull or prohibit the movement of an individual. So for the purpose of prone, we always state that you should use the lowest to highest level of aversiveness. So you should first use a prone before you try to use a mechanical restraint. Although restraints can be used, a treatment plan should contain reinforcement-based procedures. So even though there's a protocol for a child using restraints, the behavior plan itself should always contain a form of reinforcement, as we know that BCBAs always try to incorporate reinforcement into their behavior plans. Finally, restraints should be considered only when less intrusive interventions have been attempted and failed, or otherwise determined to be insufficient given adequate empirical documentation to prove this point. That is the end of my statement. I will pass it on to the con starter. Or Jenny, actually.
Okay, and now we will hear opening statements from the con team.
Hi, my name is Katie Dick, and I am currently a supervisor at an autism center, and I've worked in the field for 2 years now. I will be on the CAM side for physical restraints on individuals. I'll be first starting off with what physical restraints are from the article Use of Restraints, Seclusions, and Aversive Procedures on Students with Disabilities by Barbara Trader. And it is defined as a personal restraint that immobilizes or reduces the ability of an individual to move his or her arms, legs, or head. This does not include any physical effort. When a restraint occurs, it does a lot more than holding the client from harming themselves and others. It can cause serious injuries to both the client and the staff. As shown in my first visual, you will see that it shows the summary of restraints and injuries from data that was taken at a residential facility in southeastern Pennsylvania. Overall, this table shows that emergency use of restraints results in higher injury levels. All personal restraints injured about 168 individuals. In my next visual, you'll see that this table shows you the different types of restraint-related injuries in the same study. Most of it was scratch and abrasion, and cut or nose sutures were the top rating, but this resulted in a total of 240 different accounts of injuries. There has been many studies determining what type of restraint is the best to use for aggressive individuals with autism, but each outcome of the restraint showed that it causes injuries, trauma, and it's an easy way out for the workers to just put these poor individuals in a hole that end up causing more injuries. Not only do residents cause some serious consequences, it also fails to provide the students the support that will help improve their educational environment, as well as teach them pro-social behavior or we need to be teaching our kids coping strategies and self-management skills to prevent the strain it has on the parents, the staff, and the client involved in the restraint.
Okay. That completes our opening statements. We will now move on to the evidence-based portion of the debate. Each team will still have 4 minutes to prove their claims, and we will start with the pro team again.
Hi, my name is Claire Calvert. This is my second semester at Ball State. I'm a special educator in the state of Maryland. I've taught students with autism for 6 years now using ABA methodology. I am for the proving state area of restraints. And the first topic that I would like to cover are restraints in relation to the right to effective treatment. So the BACB Code of Ethics states in 2.09 that clients have the right to effective treatment based on research, literature, and adapted to the client. Behavior analysts have the obligation to advocate for and educate the client about scientifically supportive and most effective treatment procedures. Effective treatment procedures have been validated as having both long-term and short-term effects for the client and society. So considering this statement by the BACB Code of Ethics, we must conclude that if a restraint is determined as the least restrictive measure to treat an individual's behavior, then this is the right of the individual to be given that treatment. And furthermore, by denying them of this BACB Code of Ethics right, we are denying them of this ethically proven right to treatment. The next topic that I would like to cover, considering restraints, is the functions of a restraint. By implementing restraints for our individuals for treatments, it can be used as for a therapeutic function. This is stated by Vollmer in a 2011 article. Restraints and seclusion can also be used both to decrease frequency of behavior as well as the intensity of behavior. So when we're seeing those self-injurious behaviors or those other behaviors that are dangerous to the client's self or to others, we can not only decrease the intensity of that behavior, but also the frequency of the behavior. So next, I would like to review the evidence that I have to support this claim. Danny will now pull up my first visual in order for me to review the first article that has a study for this claim. So in this, you can see the self-injurious behaviors across a variety of clients were completely decreased significantly when we have implemented the use of restraints, and these were mechanical restraints that were implemented in this case. So when you see the open circles, that's the amount of self-injurious behaviors without restraints, and then that really significant decrease that you see with the closed circles are when the implement of the restraint has occurred, proving that by implementing the restraint, we can significantly decrease the frequency of our self-injurious behaviors in our clients. In the next visual that I have, this is another study that was conducted in 1983 by Tomkowski. And in this, by implementing more physical restraints, not only can you see that from baseline to treatment that the significance of disruptive behaviors were decreased, but also in that bottom graph, you can see that task-oriented behavior increased. So not only can we decrease the disruptive behaviors, but also we can consequently see an increase in on-task behaviors, which proves the effectiveness of restraints in more than one area. That concludes my statement proving the restraint.
All right, and now the Team Khan has 4 minutes to state their evidence.
Hi. Hi, my name is Amanda Moore, and this is my second semester at Ball State University. I work at a center that provides ABA services as a program assistant, and I have worked there for almost 4 years. I will be presenting on the con side of this debate. According to Jay in his article examining the therapeutic utility of restraints and seclusion with children and youth, the role of theory in research and practice, although using restraint and seclusions may seem like the most positive route to take when trying to maintain disruptive and maladaptive behaviors, they can also be seen as controversial for good reasons. In an individual, interior restraint is an intrusive measure. Some people have also noted that there is a danger when using restraints and seclusions, and they can become legitimized in a facility and begin to be used without question. Drawings by children where seclusion have been used also depict a lack of warmth. In the article, Restraint Procedures and Challenging Behaviors and Intellectual Disability, an analysis of causative factors by Matson and Bojoli, restraints can cause physical pain. Professionals in the field are oftentimes reluctant to use restraints because of the physical pain that can be caused and restriction of personal freedom, since restraints involve physically holding a person with the intent of restricting their movement. Unplanned restraints are even more problematic, and the chances of them resulting in injuries to the person engaging in maladaptive behavior are greater. In the 2016 article by Sherman et al., Professional Practice and Ethical Issues Related to Physical Restraint and Seclusion in Schools, restraints and seclusion were determined to cause psychological trauma and continue to remain controversial in the school setting. Students that have been abused or neglected are more susceptible, and although there may not be any physical injuries, the extent and nature of psychological injuries are unclear. There are also several ethical issues related to the use of restraint and seclusion as well, such as potential for death and injury, failure to use least-intrusive measures, and being removed from class, and insufficient training, use, and monitoring of restraints and seclusion. There is the potential for death or injury, and restraint and seclusion have been associated with a child dying as well as adult injuries. The New York Daily News wrote about a 16-year-old boy named Corey Foster who died during a restraint after suffering from cardiac arrest back in 2012. After becoming aggressive, an 8-person prone restraint was administered on Foster, during which he suffered cardiac arrest. The Child Welfare League of America estimates that the deaths of between 8 and 10 children each year in the United States is due to restraint. So we have to think about one of the core principles of ABA is being just, to provide fair and equitable treatment. Being just states, how would you like to be treated and how would you like your children to be treated? Is using restraints that can cause pain and can lead to death being just. That is the end of my part.
All right, the pro team will now have an additional 4 minutes for further rebuttal and evidence.
All right. So I want to start off by reiterating that restraints should be administered by trained individuals. Matson and Terrell discussed the example between a nurse and a surgeon. So basically what that means is we would not allow a nurse to implement heart surgery on somebody if they are not equipped to do so. So with that said, we would not allow somebody who is not trained to perform these restraints on the individuals. Every state is different. However, it's important to note that if you are administering restraints, that you are a trained individual. Taraz and Matson also state that the issues then should be proper regulation and peer review to ensure that where very severe problems exist, as I mentioned, biting off fingers or blinding oneself because you're consistently poking your eye, that treatment to curb such problems, including punishment methods, be available and implemented by trained professionals. This, in our view, parent or patient consent, properly qualified professionals, and peer review should be included, with aversive being the last resort, but an available one. These procedures be implemented only by staff who are fully trained in their use, receive regular and training, demonstrate competency using objective measures of performance, and are closely supervised by ABA or similarly trained. Amanda, I see that Matson and Bijoli stated that restraints cause physical pain, but also reported in another article with Shiraz in 1989 that intrusive procedures result in equal rates of positive to negative side effects when compared to positive procedures. For example, timeout and restraint actually demonstrated positive effects rates equal to DRO, so to differential reinforcement of other behaviors. Parent perspectives have also demonstrated, and Matas and Taraz, that parents prefer restraint or seclusions when it comes down to protecting their child's safety. So parents actually reported that they would be approving of restraints if it meant that it would save their child's life and that of others. A lot of the issue with restraints and seclusions also come with the fact that they are perceived as immoral and inhumane. But I ask you on moral criteria. No functionally based data exists to support this, according to Matas and Taraz. In other words, it's very subjective. What are the side effects? Literature review done by Matas and Taraz, 82 articles also state that there are no true side effects. In fact, 212 articles reported positive side effects, and only 16 of those reported negative side effects. So 93% had positive side effects. On that note, back to Dan.
All right, Con team will now have 4 minutes to begin their rebuttal and evidence.
So according to the Walker and Pinkelman There are increasing efforts to meet the needs for students who engage in problem behavior, with a major goal to eliminate the use of reactive measures, specifically restraints and seclusions. The pros say that restraints should be conducted by trained individuals, but did you know that many times these trained staff are often more likely to do so instead of going off their behavior plan that would cause less immediate effects? This was a study conducted by Walker and Pinkelman. Many behavior plans go off of least restrictive to none. Instead, we need to be teaching alternative behaviors and responding to these problem behaviors more appropriately. As you can see in my next visual that Danny will be pulling up, there was a questionnaire that was given out to parents to complete these questions. They show that many parents did not know or have any knowledge of the different types of restraints that were being used, along with not understanding why they were being used. There was one in particular that said, if your child has been restrained, what form of restraint was used? Many of them did not know what kind. And the result was that many of them were injured. It is easy enough to conduct an FBA to identify the function of the student's problem behavior. From here, you can give the student a replacement behavior or some new coping methods, along with training all staff, not only working with each client, but everyone in the center, none to least restrictive. There are safety care trainings that teach you the same way. That concludes my statement.
All right, and now we are going to move on to the summaries and closing remarks. And Pro Team will have another 4 minutes.
I'm going to be summarizing our statements here today for the Pro Team. First, I would like to state that restraints and seclusion should be used when they are determined to be the least restrictive treatment to ensure that individuals receive their right to behavior treatment. Tying back to that code 2.09, the literature and the evidence that we have shared today proves that there is evidence out there to support the use of restraints when it is labeled as the least restrictive treatment for the client. So we are ensuring our clients of their right to treatment, to behavior treatment, by implementing these strategies when appropriate. Evidence supports this treatment to effective and interfering behaviors, including self-injury and disruptive behaviors. There are also positive effects in the area of increasing on-task behaviors as well, proven once again in the evidence that we have shared today through both the Tompowski article as well as the King article. Finally, research shows that implementing restraint to decrease positive behaviors has a dual effect of both increasing learning opportunities and once again decreasing frequency and intensity of those behaviors. Not only can we protect our students from having self-injurious behaviors that are dangerous to themselves, but aggressive behaviors that are dangerous to others. That concludes the ending statements for the Pro Team.
All right, and now Con Team has 4 minutes to make their closing remarks.
Techniques that can potentially prevent the use of restraints and seclusion should always be used first. If restraints are repeatedly being used to help minimize maladaptive behaviors, the current intervention is not effective and needs to be modified to decrease the use of restraints. In a study done by Sunny et al., there were concerns about restraints leading to injury and death, and they continue to be expressed. So in the study, participants had been restrained for behavioral reasons and had significantly higher anxiety, pervasive developmental disabilities, schizophrenia, stereotypy, elimination disorder, and impulse control disorder scores. So the visuals that are going to be pulled up show that in table 1, we see the gender, age, ethnicity, and level of mental retardation of the two groups, and the clients that were restrained and the clients who were not restrained. In table 2, the results of the two groups are displayed. The group that had been restrained had higher scores on the irritability, stereotypy, and hyperactivity scales. Implementation of least intrusive intervention and effective early intervention needs to be a priority to help minimize the use of something as intrusive as restraint. The use of restraints also raise ethical and practical concerns. So not only are they dangerous, but research has shown they can function as a positive reinforcer for some clients and ultimately end up maintaining the behavior that was meant to be reduced. Putting the client's safety first should always be a priority, and the use of restraints in seclusion can be harmful and potentially result in injury, unknown psychological trauma, or worse, death. And that concludes the closing statements for the con team.
All right, and that is the end of the debate portion of the use of restraints and seclusions on individuals with developmental disabilities. We will now enter the Q&A portion. So the first question is, a lack of training is a potential issue for those who perform restraints. Are there any strategies or methods that can help improve training for administering restraints and or decrease the need for restraints?
So I'm Claire Calvert. Once again, I'm going to be answering this question today. There are crisis prevention intervention trainings, which are also called CPI trainings, that are available across the country. So these trainings individuals both how to prevent behaviors, so a lot of preventative reinforcement strategies, as well as how to respond and assess crisis situations and implement restraints. So it teaches the individuals taking the course how to assess a crisis situation to see if the risk that the behavior itself exhibits is outweighed by the risk that the restraint will exhibit. So if the risk that the individual is posing to themselves or others is so significant that a restraint would pose less of a risk in order to help ease the behavior to get rid of the danger in the situation. So during these courses, not only are individuals trained on the preventative strategies, but they're also trained on how to properly administer restraint. There is a guidebook in which they are trained on how to administer different restraints depending on the situation, from least to most severe, and along with pictures and then demonstration by the instructor of these restraints. And then they actually go through a physical portion where they practice administering these restraints, and they have to pass both a physical portion of the test as well as a written portion of the test to be considered CPI or crisis intervention trained. And then once they are certified in this, they not only have that certification only for a certain amount of time, but they have to get recertified every couple of years.
Okay, and now we will move on to the second question, which is, the use of restraints and seclusion vary from setting to setting. For example, in Indiana, mechanical restraints are not recommended to be used for people in adult services. Is it ethical to use this as a way to address behavior if it is not something that can be used across various settings? What happens if a child has a mechanical restraint in one setting, but then moves to a new setting where that type of restraint is not allowed?
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I will be discussing a perspective to answer the question. Mechanical restraints are used to address and manage violence and or behavior. Although very controversial, the use of mechanical restraints are used to prevent harm. Preventing harm is in fact the core principle of ABA. On a personal note, I believe it's ethical to use mechanical restraints, even if it cannot be used across various settings, because each case is different. Every individual is different, and every BIP is made specifically for that client. So mechanical restraints are necessary in some cases, but definitely not all. Actually, I had a client who engaged in very severe self-interest behaviors, and this specific client a lot of head banging, and at some point you have to know when to use restraints and how. So it all comes down to in being informing and knowing how to implement the correct restraint, because for this specific client I was not able to provide restraints. We had to have the BCBA come in, or in some cases when it was at home, the parent come in, somebody that knew the client and somebody that had the client's best interest at heart. With that being said, we had tried DRO, we had tried functional communication, we had tried a lot of positive reinforcement interventions before resulting to the use of restraints. And as I mentioned, at some point you have to decide, you have to make a professional judgment as to what is the best thing to do for your client.
And I am Amanda, and I will be providing a perspective on whether I think mechanical restraints should be used in one setting, and even if they aren't allowed in others. So mechanical restraints are extremely restrictive, and if they are not allowed in one setting, then they should not be allowed in others due to their level of restrictiveness. I do not believe that it is ethical to use a restrictive measure in one setting and not use it in additional settings. Hold on, guys, I think I messed up.
That's okay.
Anyway, if a least restrictive measure can be used to address and manage violent or self-injurious behaviors in one setting, that same measure should be made a priority across additional settings. Okay.
All right, and now we will be going to the final question, which is, do you have any personal experience related to this topic that you would like to share?
Hi, I'm Katie, and I will be giving some personal experiences. I have had many experiences performing restraints for aggressive clients, and every time that we do the debriefing, it becomes very difficult doing it to the same client over and over again, because you see how traumatizing it was, not only for the client, but for the staff as well. But I have recently stumbled upon a new intervention where you work on having the clients recognizing their thoughts and when their body is changing and how to express their emotions when that happens. In this study, there are different tasks, data, and tally sheets to keep track of, but the client basically does not want to do the task. We do not fight with them. We simply just sit and wait for them. They do not earn, they do not lose any tallies, as long as like you could wait all day, but they have to get X amount of tallies to complete the next task and to get stuff out of a marketplace where they could be earning reinforcers, which is pretty reinforcing to each of the clients that are doing this currently. We've been doing this for about 3 months now, and the aggression has been decreasing from very, very long aggressive behavioral episodes to long episodes, but there's no aggression in them. So the intensity of the aggressions have decreased quite a bit with a response cost. So it's been really cool to see that, and we haven't been having to use restraints on them, and it is very, very, very heartwarming knowing we don't have to do that anymore. So no restraints are needed, which is pretty cool, and we have been able to find the right intervention for the child to decrease their behaviors and not having to use any more restraints on them.
Okay, well that concludes our debate. I will put up our resources or references that we used for the pro team, and then con. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening.
What's your timer right now? Just so
here, do you want me to stop it and then come back in?